Welcome everyone. It's Angelo Robles. Today, your family office doesn't have an AI problem. It has an ownership problem. You want to own the data, own the compute. The Family Office Trust Center. Today, our special guest is Greg Silverman, founder and principal consultant at ClarityEdge, a family office technology and operations consultancy. Greg is quite the figurehead in the community. I've known him for a number of years. He has spent more than 20 years. Greg, you're getting old like me, working inside and alongside multi-generational family offices with a focus on portfolio accounting, financial reporting, data architecture, operational infrastructure, and the integration of systems, including things like Advent, Addepar, Sage, QuickBooks, and many other reporting and accounting platforms. What makes Greg different, besides being very smart, of course, and a great guy, his current work focuses on helping family offices build private AI-enabled infrastructure while retaining control of their data, applications, and compute. Greg, it's great to finally have you on the show.
Angelo, thanks so much for having me. Great to be here. It's been a long time. I think, you've been an outspoken leader in our community talking about the power of AI. And, it's just natural that we finally have some time to talk about this. So thanks for having me.
Long overdue. There's definitely many quality people in technology consulting for family offices. We know many of them. There's a wonderful breadth of talent and people pushing things forward. I do find Greg not only to have a classic and incredible background, but someone who really has adopted, has even to some degree changed his mindset, and a capability of being a critical thinker when it comes to AI integration, kind of like no other technology consultant in the family office world, at least relatively recently, that I came across. And we got a chance to be reintroduced actually at my first AI Masterclass last summer. Greg was an instructor and an attendee, had incredible intellect to share. And to me, the special thing about him, completely humble, learning, asking questions, and within months, really adapting his mindset and his work, which is very technically proficient, into AI-enabled family offices, and I've been a fan myself for a long time. So thank you, Greg. Why don't we get right to it? It was even hinted when I was introducing you in my title. You've spent 20 years inside, with all due respect, the least glamorous layer of family offices, the general ledger, reconciliation, reporting stack. So why don't we start there? Why is the AI conversation in this industry being led, with due respect, by people who have never closed, we could define that differently, a family's books?
Well, Angelo, it's a unique skill set. Let's say there's not a lot of multi-generational billionaire families out there that have been operating a family office for 20 or 30 plus years. There's a select number of them. So, that's the one thing. You're not going to find a lot of that talent naturally going to the software world. Although I shouldn't say that. There are people that have real experience. But let's zoom out a little bit, right? Where are we in the world of software, and where are we in the world of AI? And I think, up until very recently, SaaS has been the model that's controlled not only in the family office, but industry wide, about how people have shifted some roles in the office to, let's call it, an outsource/service in the cloud. And that's been what we've seen as an industry in financial services, family office, investment management, going probably back to the 2010s. And here we are now, where all these vendors that were SaaS vendors are now layering AI, and they're talking about AI. And that goes for, all the big companies out there, without naming names at the moment, right? So the conversation has gone from, let's, as a SaaS, community, help our firms, help our clients take some work off their plate. And now it's, let's use AI to supercharge what they're doing. But I think what's missing is control of the data, right? What happened before SaaS? People were crunching numbers in their office. You had a lot more roles in the office. People were working through applications with a lot of manual workflow. So a long-winded answer to your question, Angelo, but I just don't think the experience is there from, let's call it that era, prior to the 2010s, where desktop software was how people operated, server-based architecture, desktop software, things that, quite frankly, a lot of the offices I work with today still operate around, right? So while the landscape of vendors has changed, the infrastructure has stayed pretty constant. And there are a lot of firms out there, even still in 2026, who have, let's say, haven't fully adopted even that SaaS model. So that's my take on where we are in the market. I feel like there's a lot of AI noise. There's a lot of AI slop that's being put on top of, let's call it, people's workflows that they don't really have a full grasp on, because a lot of it's been, number one, either outsourced or managed in the cloud through a SaaS provider. And I'm not saying that that's inherently bad. That's just the state of affairs we're in.
And when I'm asked about the three things that are probably most important to a family office, and they're a little broad, but people remember things in three, I say people, number one. I would have said systems, which are created by people, but let's go with it, number two. And technology as a top three a couple of years ago. Now, with what we're seeing with AI, with intelligence effectively coming from sand, silicon, and chips, and how things are evolving, I absolutely moved it to number two. We could debate what's going to happen when intelligence hits a further level and the integration further with people. Today is not that discussion. But if you are in finance in the family office world, if you're an entrepreneur, not understanding the technology, the tech stack, and understanding the true AI, not just slapping AI on, but having it be more AI native, and then taking control of your data, effectively your compute, you will have a hard time optimizing the internal and even external capabilities in your family office moving forward right now, let alone 6 months or a year from now. We're going to get into all that. But related to that, and maybe taking a step back, I often hear what I call a fantasy every week, as much as I may be an advocate of AI. Oh, we'll just point AI at our mess and it'll figure it out. You've seen the actual data inside, like real family offices. What happens when a model meets 10 years of fragmented systems and inconsistent, even entity accounting?
Yeah, look, Angela, I try to keep it very practical with my clients, right? AI doesn't really fall into the conversation as a solution until I actually understand with them and they buy into my understanding of what they're doing and what the right process may look like. And if automation makes sense, we automate a process. And that is before AI, right? That could involve some sort of a script or something that exists already, like leveraging what your technology does already and making it work better, right? So AI really needs to be that layer at the end on top of very organized, structured, automated data, where you could then have your AI direct automation. So my thoughts are really practical. AI comes after you figure out the basics. And there's too much noise out there about, oh, let's just, spin up Claude Fable and, it'll be able to generate me a financial statement and look how great it looks. And it only took 20 minutes. It's like, okay, that's great. And is that a deterministic outcome? Can you produce that every time? Do you own a copy of it that you could save down? Is it auditable, right? All these things that people don't really think about. They're just kind of very impressed with the AI theater. And it's hard to not to be, right? These tools are amazing. But you have to really think about it first principles. What is this reasoning on? It's reasoning on data. And is the data structured? Is the data logical? Does it follow some sort of a rule set? Do people in the office trust it, right? Like this idea of AI will just figure out my mess is very dangerous. Number one, a lot of these agentic, quote unquote, harnesses like from OpenAI and Anthropic, amazing tools. However, they live on your computer. They download packages from the internet. They just do things, and you have to stop them if they're doing something you don't want them to do. Like, you're not really in control if you're just like, hey, just tackle my mess. It's just going to start doing things. So you have to have a plan, and planning is part of prompting, and having the right data and right data meaning it's correct. Two, is it structured the right way? Can I reason on it? And what do we mean by data? It's a very broad term. Like, who owns what? When did I own it? How do I own it? All these things. And I'm happy to get into those details with you, Angela, and what the ideal data model for a family office might look like. But those are the things. Like, you have to think about the data first, and AI comes very at the end. So I get a bit frustrated with vendors that talk about AI without addressing the real workflow first. As I'm a consultant, boots on the ground. I've done these workflows before, so I know kind of what works, and I learn from my clients every day about what their challenges are. But again, you have to have the right mindset going into AI. It's not going to create processes for you. It's not going to create truth for you, right? And those are the things you still have to do. And especially in a family office, as a steward of information and data and wealth, that's your duty, right? So I'm very much in the mindset of practical AI, and I don't like to think about AI theater and look how powerful AI is. That's not what, a lot of family offices also stay away from AI from that same reason. So I want to keep it very practical and talk about why AI works for families, and not let's call it the AI theater that we both see, Angelo, in the market.
You had me, or singing in the same tune as soon as you mentioned first principles. So completely agree. The concept of best practices and benchmarking is a value. Simply, in an opaque industry like the single family office world, I don't think that's good enough, and you don't know what you're benchmarking or best practicing really against. First principles thinking is superior and effectively cuts through that. You did say some things that I would find important. You have a plan also when you do nothing. You're electing to somewhat be ignorant, to maybe let ego and fear, which are normal human emotions. I go through them myself. But you ignoring it and not knowing how to understand, how to master it, how to work with it, and how it's never going to be worse than it is today is going to be a horrific approach, especially if you're non-bloodline. You're not the one who's the principal or the heirs. You're effectively an employee, I hope a well-paid one. But that could all change as things are evolving very quickly. Give me your best one-line definition. What does owning your data actually mean specifically for a family office?
If the internet was down for a week, would you still be able to operate your family office with your computer and your files and your data? Would you still be able to do that? Or is your data completely dependent on, let's call it, forces outside of your control? I think that's the best way to think about it, right? So what I think about data ownership prior to, let's say, December 2022, the ChatGPT moment. But prior to that moment, data ownership in the family office was table stakes, very practical. The idea of, if I need to switch from this reporting system to that reporting system, I have a copy of my data. It's reconciled, it's structured, it's portable. I can move it around and not have to worry about, let's call it, conversion costs, or I could plug analytics on top. I could plug, let's say, FactSet data around my portfolio data. Like best-in-class investment firms do these sort of things. They integrate on top of structured, well-defined data. This is stuff that's existed. I've been a technology consultant for better part of the last decade. This is what investment firms do. They build around structured data. They're able to build analytics, algorithms, different things to serve their clients to generate alpha in the market. Data is very important. With AI, right, the firms that are already invested in their data are already miles ahead prior to the AI moment. So when we think about data ownership, it's that exact thing that we were doing before AI that the top firms were doing, which is structuring their data, owning a copy of it, understanding that with their vendor partners, they could do things independently. Not saying they need to build their own systems, but with their vendor partners, they could port the data over to their side of the table, do things with it, keep a proprietary, keep their special sauce in-house, that sort of thing. That's existed for a long time. So I guess what I'm saying, that's my definition of data ownership in a nutshell. It's, can you make your data portable? Can you plug analysis on top? Can you seamlessly connect tools? Is your definition of ownership well defined? Do you have your documents organized? This is all data. Do people understand processes according to a written or established set of documents, or does that live in someone's head? That's data. So that's what we mean, Angela. It's a long-winded answer. I know you wanted a one-sentence one, but I wanted to give some context around my experience and why that's important in this conversation.
It's funny how I'm probably the most long-winded person, yet I expect answers to be so succinct. It's so eloquent when people could do that. I wish I had that capability, Greg. It's not in my DNA or something that I've learned. You said a lot there. There's a lot that we could dive into. Most family offices in using technology, with your answer and what you said prior, are using effectively SaaS, software as a service. Many of them are damn good, and the family office industry has felt comfortable with them for a number of years. But there are some buts there, and that relates to the data, who owns it, who could look at it. And when you're using outside companies, you are bringing in, for lack of a better word, an outside vendor into often some of your most private data. And if it's living in the cloud, what kind of security is there? Like you said, power goes out for an hour a day, a week. Do you still have control on your, let's go with the word, mainframes? Are you so reliant on the vendor? Is it vendor lock? What happens if their terms of service, their pricing goes up? What happens if it's not too customizable? They're a huge company. They do what they do, and you either acquiesce to them or you don't. So this relates to a lot of different things that we will get into later, where I guess you could say I might have burned some bridges in my solo last night when I spoke about how easy it is in today's world with Bolt, with Cursor, with Claude Code, with OpenAI, to basically recreate, talk to the machine what I want to have, and have control over that, quote unquote, that software. We'll get a little bit more into that, but let's take it a step earlier, related to my last question to you. Walk us through a little bit of a test. If I'm a principal, what question, or again, I guess I like things in threes, 3 questions, do I ask my own team tomorrow morning to find out whether we actually control our data or pay to access it?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I would think about it from the perspective of, like I said earlier, if somebody that had the login information, or if for some reason you couldn't access, let's just say, your cloud provider's portfolio reporting system, do you have at least all those reports saved down somewhere, like from prior periods or prior quarters? Do you have extracts? Do you have that information somewhere? Does it exist? Where does it exist? How is it stored? Is it organized? And is it portable? And it's like, does that organizational structure of those documents or that data, is that well understood? Or is that just one person in the office filing something, right? Or is that your assistant? If you're a CFO, is that your controller? Does only the controller know what to do there? To me, those are probably not passing grades to the answer of, do we own our data, right? If you can't say yes to many of those questions.
Yeah.
What does that mean though? So when you're evaluating a vendor, how do you know if you could own your data with it? It's not a vendor specific question, right? So I want to be clear there. It is in some cases, if your vendor is completely a closed vendor, and I don't want to pick on anyone in this podcast, but if your vendor doesn't have an API and they don't have a way to extract data easily from the system, you're at best sharing your data. You really don't own it, right? At best, you're sharing it. because you are trapped. The data is trapped inside and you can't access it in one big data dump. And if you did ask for that, you'd probably be hit with some sort of fee. It would be a conversion project, or they give it to you in an unstructured mess, right? That's my experience with some families that have gone from, let's call total control of their data, to, let's call it, the SaaS promise. And again, not everyone is that way, but that's sort of what happens when a culture is used to control and they go to a version of it where they lose control, where it's more about, let's say, the dashboard or something where it's a headcount issue, whatever it is. So let's say that data ownership is more about, can I extract my data regularly and routinely, right? You might have heard the expression API. APIs are also becoming table stakes in today's, like, if you're evaluating a vendor that lives in the cloud, like, you need an API solution so you could have access to your data. You could push data in, you could take data out. And what do you do with that data, right? The idea is you could then control it, right? And that's where we could get into more conversations, Angela, about what should live inside a trust boundary and what you do inside that trust boundary with AI. But I guess the idea is, even, and I think you see this, Angela, but even before we have the AI conversation, there's so much practicality in this idea of, do I own my data? For the idea of, can I extend it to other applications in my office? Can I have it for risk mitigation, vendor, let's say challenges, or the idea of, do I need to eventually have to unplug from this platform and go to a new platform? Data ownership makes sense there from just a practical perspective, right? So we haven't even talked about AI yet.
Yes, we haven't, because, as you said, the foundations we're talking about now are important leading into that. You mentioned one thing to me that's very important as someone who looks at risk in family offices around the world. And effectively, that's kind of what I would define as a single point of failure. If you have one person who has the keys to your kingdom, they may be incredible, but I don't know, suppose they get sick, they move on, they get disgruntled, they get, God forbid, compromised. There are things that could go wrong. You need security, checks and balances, and you need to have a system in place where, if that were to happen, there's an understanding how to use the tools and resources within the family office. So you've integrated, I mentioned, and there's many more, but Advent, Addepar, Sage, QuickBooks, all powerful, very impressive programs. What did those integration wars, maybe that's the word I'll use, teach you that transfers directly to now this new, you hinted at it, 3.5-year-old, kind of a toddler, 3.5 years old of AI? What has that taught you directly in this new AI era?
Well, just like I'm talking about how valuable data is to the families and the wealth owners, the data is just as valuable to, frontier model companies, SaaS vendors, and that's evident, right? And so what we're seeing here is the data is becoming more and more important for both sides of the aisle, meaning vendors want to be able to provide you more insights. AI frontier labs want to be able to learn from you so that they can deliver better products to you. And that's the model we're in right now. And I think the biggest thing that we haven't talked about yet with this idea of data ownership is, what data needs to remain absolutely private. And for the longest time, the intelligence inside a family office, right before AI, that was extremely private, right? Why we structure a billionaire's estate a certain way, who inherits what, and how we're going to deliver the operating company shares, all these things that are very complex legal information that could never leak outside of the confidentiality of a family office, right? So, the idea that AI is going to help with that in this world is very appealing, because that's very, very complex, time-consuming work that involve teams of experts. I'm talking about legal structuring, estate planning, high-end family office services around investments and ownership of companies. When we think about AI helping with that. The problem is it's the privacy problem, right? So the privacy problem is real. People are concerned about, intelligence on their data, not only their data, but now intelligence on top of that data leaving. So there's been reluctance to adopt AI, and it's a real concern, right? And then, so when you're saying, where are we going right now with Sage, Addepar, Advent, they're all becoming data companies that will become AI companies that will help sell you a tool based on your data, right? It's going to be a tool on your data that is going to be doing things for you that you're paying a service for. And I think that is valuable to do that, right? So that's what I'm seeing. What has this taught me is that data is king, and that's where the capital is flowing, right? And that's where people are realizing. What I'm saying is that certain family offices are seeing the opportunity and the idea of, well, there's some negotiating power here, because if we have our data absolutely structured and we, let's say, took the time and made the investment, and let's say we're a multi-billion-dollar family office and we have investments across public and private markets, and we have a complex investment technology stack and staff. If we're doing all of that and we took the exercise to structure our data and do things the right way, you have the leveraging power now to create your own internal things that were never possible until maybe a couple of months ago.
Mm-hmm.
And you have negotiating power now. So maybe you don't pay, maybe you threaten, to say, look, I could spin this thing up myself. I know it's not going to be the same as you, top of the line SaaS platform, but I own my data and I could do this now. And I think that's what's powerful. I'm not telling everybody to vibe code their own platforms. What I am telling everybody is your data is what's valuable, and you actually will have the option to build your own applications very easily, because your data is what makes it happen. Data sets are what make everything possible, and I think you're going to, and Angela, we can get into these details, but I know you follow these podcasts on some of the AI leaders out there, and data sets, unique data sets on human information and human decisions is what people are paying real capital for to invest in around their AI products and harnesses. So family offices are a perfect example of that, right? The data that lives inside a family office, whether it's an investment decision, whether it's a complex tax workflow, whatever that might be, those are things that your vendor applications and your frontier AI labs value so much, so that they could learn from and sell you more product. That is the market we're in right now, and that's a great place to be. But I think for some people, the data is just too sensitive and should not live in a vendor cloud, right? And when we talk about intelligence on top of that data, that's where it gets a little bit more dangerous, right? The data alone, you should own it. You could share it with your vendors, but when we're talking about that proprietary alpha, that special sauce, what makes you unique, why is that being shared with the vendor, right? And that's where you and I, Angelo, are kind of aligned, and we can talk more about what does sovereignty mean? What is, in the family office world, practically, what does that mean? So anyway, that's, again, a few tangents on an answer about some specific vendor platforms that I turned into more of a broad interpretation of where we stand in the market.
I know I'm rubbing off on you too much, Greg. Yeah, there's a lot there. And I do think it's important for an audience, and you hinted at it, most family offices, rather bluntly, they're not AI fluid. I've spoken around the world on this, digitally and in person. I give most family offices a grade on 1 to 10, with 10 being a very high level of AI knowledge and integration. Most are a 1 or a 2. The good news is that's probably where I was 2 years ago. And I'm not a technologist like you. I'm older. My brain is so-called set in its ways. And I put in the work. I was open-minded to it. I spent money. I experimented. Some things did not work. I wasted time and money. And now I'm creating practically daily my own applications and creating agent and agent swarms, including on proprietary, more sovereign open weight models. You can, as a family office, get better very, very quickly in this. I could maybe even say 30 days. In the comments, happy birthday, Jessica, by the way. And Ivan, data sovereignty needs of digital decentralization first. That could be a unique topic. If you have data and sovereignty on your own metal, in your own hardware, on open weight models, and then you have properly secured backups and remote access, then some of that, depending on how I read into your question, may not be needed, but you're not going to get that with frontier or models that I would call, again, you have no ownership, you're renting, and sometimes renting is the right move versus owning and controlling. We're going to come back to that, but given that you did bring it up, and I think the audience is expecting, why don't we give a little bit of a foundation, because they just may not know. What would be your definition using AI the way that most people use it, which is to chat, not to build? And we're going to get to that. They're mainly using frontier models. They may be using a free model. They may be helping to train the platform effectively on your questions and the responses it gives you. And as a family office, I don't think that's what you want. I have tremendous respect for OpenAI, for Anthropic, for Grok, for even now Meta's back in the game with Muse. I use those platforms every day, but I understand, even though they say one thing, do I want to rent my intelligence, as I believe Chamath Palihapitiya said, rent my intelligence from an entity where my peers and competitors are also using it and maybe learning from it, and we're all getting back debatably similar answers? Give the context of what's a frontier model AI versus an open weight model that I control, that does not touch the cloud on my metal, my hardware.
Yeah, look, Angelo, it's really interesting to me that I'm even commenting on a question like this, knowing that it's just such a new topic, right? So like you, I'm just being humble about this. I thought I knew a lot about AI going into the Masterclass last year in New York City with you and your group. It was a great event, but I came out of it really more like, wow, I have to actually level up my skills, because the folks here are like me. They want to learn, they want to roll up their sleeves, and they want to understand this technology because we know it's powerful. So, since then, I have really dug in and I've tried to understand, and I'm learning still every day what the world of AI really means, and what is an open weight model versus a frontier closed model, and what is the hardware you need. So, I've done all. I've invested the time in learning. I've invested the money in the hardware, and really so that I could serve my clients better. Ultimately, that's the idea. A lot of what I do is deep technical work and coding, right? So I work with clients to enhance their current tech stack, whether they're on a Sage or an Addepar, QuickBooks, Advent, whatever the tech stack looks like. I have deep experience in many different integrated stacks. We help build, the right data layer, the right reporting, and my services have been able to greatly expand because of my command of and use of AI and what the tools that I have in my tool belt right now. And I guess what I'm saying here is I've learned also over this time that I can't give my, let's call it IP, the things, the problems I'm solving, how I solve them, how my brain operates, because I think eventually one day the AI companies will get into the business I'm in and everybody else's businesses. So I'm a little bit, maybe I wouldn't call it paranoid, but I'm also thinking about these tools. Number one, I never share client data with them. But number two, I can't also share my intelligence with them, like how I'm solving problems, because that's kind of the special sauce. These are things that real business leaders are, that run organizations much larger than mine deal with every day and are concerned with. And it's a topic, right? This idea of how do I protect my IP? So That's really where this idea always of local AI was always so attractive in the family office to me, because it's like, wow, we could keep all of our data in-house and all of our intelligence in-house. And like, while today that's probably a pretty clunky workflow, like people are still figuring out, that is 100% going to be the future. And it does not make sense to start tomorrow. You start today on this because you have to get your data right. But like, that's where we're going. It's like personal AI. So I guess what I'm saying here is that's possible today. And I've dug in and I've learned about what models I could run locally on my computer with my data, completely disconnected from the internet, and the type of performance I could expect from them. But that's my experience. But maybe taking it back to your initial question, most people are using AI, ChatGPT or Gemini or something, to answer a question like they would ask maybe traditionally ask a search engine, right? So maybe they ask something that used to take 5 clicks. It's just one answer now, and that's how most people use AI. Maybe the next level is people using like a co-work type of a tool, or an let's call it a co-pilot, whatever those tools are that sit on top of their existing apps, like Outlook or email or things like that are able to summarize your inbox or assign you tasks and things. That's probably level 2. But that's the vast majority of people, that use AI today. They're probably in one of those 2 camps. And especially in the family office world, there definitely are the outliers that are leaders. And we know some of them, Angelo. But most people are, questioning whether or not they can upload this document to Claude because it has some sensitive info, but it's so long and it would be so valuable if I could do that. So they're trying to figure out ways how they can mask the data and still use AI. And it's clunky because by the time they figure out how to do that, it would have been easier to just read through the whole thing and do the actual work themselves. Right. So these are some of the real challenges I see out there. And that's what drew me towards like this idea of you need to start integrating this idea of what can you do locally with AI. So we're in the very early innings. I do have one client that we are mandated to build out a local AI, let's call it a layer on top of data and applications that we're already in process of building, but it comes later, right? So local AI, needs a use case. I think there's a sense of, if you're technical and you like building computers and you like staying on the cutting edge, I think it's a great time to be alive and do that. So for the extent that you understand tech, and like the technical concepts and want to learn more, Angelo, your point is well taken. Like it can be done. People can learn how to use these tools and learn how to use local AI, but again, it has to be practical. I think the challenge probably is you need the time to do it. You need the motivation to do it. And I'll be honest, I think a lot of the folks I work with inside these types of family offices, accounting teams, people that are doing investment operations, it's a lean team. They don't have time to do this stuff. And, sometimes they happen to have the technical aptitude to learn, and those are great clients to work with. And other times, they may not. And we have ways to help clients, kind of get that technical aptitude a little bit, more advanced. But that's essentially when we think about, frontier AI, that's ChatGPT, Claude, right? Those are the frontier. When we talk about local, for lack of a better term, those are what we call open weight models. Those that could run on your computer without you having to connect to, let's call it an internet service. And this is new, and a lot of people don't realize that exists and it can actually be useful today. So, I like to educate folks on it, but again, it's hard enough to educate folks on the data problem. So by the time we get to AI, it's usually we've figured out the data problem.
With all due respect to the kind of executives that you're mentioning, who I believe are talented, smart, and of service to the family. Again, I've been in this community for decades, tremendous respect for them. But if the attitude is, I'm busy, now you want me to learn something new, something that maybe to some degree I'm training it to kind of, let's go with the word replace me. Again, all fair concerns. How do you think that's going to play out for you in a year, in 2 years, when you're not AI native? You're not doing more, better, and faster with the intelligence and capability that is getting better every second. It's not going to play out well for you. You find the time. You have to work more than 40 hours a week. I don't care if it's the summer. There are resources besides me that could help you. Again, I think I'm not kidding when I say within 30 days. I'm legit about that. But many of you, my words, still have your head in the sand about it, and you're going to find out what's going to happen as the years progress. And I don't mean 10 years, a lot sooner. Now, yeah, the open weight models, you're going to have to own the hardware. Again, we're talking family offices here. I think they could afford multiple Mac Minis, a Mac Studio, if they don't want to wait AMD, DGX Spark. So sure, there's going to be some outlay on hardware, but then you're going to own, and we're not going to get too much into the detail about, well, how do I access an open weight? How do I use Olama and Hugging Face? Which of the open weight models is best? Honestly, for members, my books and my masterclass, which are updated effectively every week because things are changing so rapidly, talk about all of that. But that is going to be integral. We're not even getting into, first of all, how you're chatting and restructuring an email. Laughable. Like, that's how you're using this intelligence? Do you understand markdown files, a second brain? Do you understand meta prompting? Everything is changing so quickly that even your chats, you're using it as effectively a glorified, Google or browser. You have to be better than that. And then you'll get the confidence for Claude Cowork, for Claude Code, for OpenAI products, for OpenWeight, for Hermes. And again, nothing special about me. If I could do it, you could do it. And probably you're all smarter than me and can learn it quicker than my 300 to 500 hours. We're going to come back to some of the nuances of that. But I want to still dive into maybe where we left off. A lot of vendors want families to believe the answer, if they're looking to replace something existent, is rip and replace. You argue, and you might be right about this, maybe the opposite, that there's enormous value to maybe build around the systems that a family office may already own. So maybe we could debate that's a little hybrid, but how do you go about understanding where they are, how comfortable they are, the capability of the current team, and integrating more AI native applications, either external or internal, with what they already have?
Yeah, I'll comment quickly just on the hardware piece that you said earlier. Families and principals that have been doing this for a long time remember when you invested in servers that sat in the server closet in the office, right? It's no different. Today, like, you want to own a computer that can give you local AI if you're serious about owning your data and establishing frameworks around that and governing your data. It's just natural to have the intelligence as well. So this is just about practicality, and we're not saying you have to, like, this is a modest investment. Again, the hardware is going to get more and more expensive, but it's still available. It's a modest investment. Somewhere around 10 grand would get most family offices way ahead of the game if they had their data organized and they wanted to own some local intelligence. And, again, if people are interested in that, that's a perfect example of like what we would be doing at the masterclass, which I know we'll talk about. But to your question about, data ownership, and when we think about, rip and replace is very tempting to some people that have been working with systems for a long time that feel very manual or feel very old and outdated. And they talk to other people in the community, maybe other principals of other family offices or whatever, and they learn that, look, there are more modern ways to do things. And there's a lot of frustration because of the cost involved in not only purchasing new applications, but to get there. There's a road to get there that people don't tell you about. There's a long, windy road of data conversion, of people being frustrated with a decision, a technology decision. You're changing the system that somebody has worked with for a long time, and they decide to retire, and then what, right? So there are these decisions that happen inside of family offices around technology infrastructure that make the rip and replace very tempting, which is, let me rip this out, let me bring in a vendor. Actually, let me bring in somebody who already does this for us, like actually runs the software. So like even full outsourcing has become something. But I guess what I'm saying here is there's kind of a third option now, and I always try to look for this for clients if it makes sense, but I'm finding it more and more possible now with the tools available to us, is how can we build things around what we already know works, that may be clunky, that may actually not be the 2025 or 2026 version of what people think is modern, but we build things around it to feel that way. And we make the experience modern, and we have AI enabled workflows. Like these are some of the things that are possible, and you need folks that understand workflows to figure this out. I know there are family offices out there that do this already today. They've done this for a long time. They've said, wow, how could we use AI to make things work better? And they're using things that they did manually for a long time, like advanced Excel or Visual Basic, and they're using AI to build incredible stuff that was never possible before. I know that exists. So maybe those are not the people we need to talk to, but for the people that are still stuck in old systems and are not technical, they need to know that vendors are not the solution. Your data is the solution. Getting your data structured is the solution, because then you have, like I said earlier, portability and this idea of negotiating power. So you could say, look, with what we have in AI today, I have very structured data. My data is gold. I could do whatever I want with it. I could build an application and maintain it myself and never share it with anyone, or I could share my data with you, vendor. What kind of deal can you offer me, right? That's the world we're entering into, I think, with local AI and this idea of rip and replace. You don't always have to rip and replace things. You could stay where you are. Now, in some sense, there's some tools out there. There's a tool like QuickBooks Desktop or Advent Access. These are old school tools that likely are on life support and will not be supported anymore, right? Likely because those two, and again, I'm not trying to pick on them, but that means that it's harder for them to watch what you're doing, harder for the company to see how your data is being used, and ultimately that it's for them, the juice isn't worth the squeeze to keep you as a customer in those type of platforms. That's just the world we're moving into. So I guess what I'm saying here is there are going to be options for people to have that familiar desktop type of software if they own their data, right? And if they could make it portable. So rip and replace may be necessary, but usually it's not. And I guess if you have nothing, you need something. So, you can't rip out something that doesn't exist, if that makes sense. So, I think people that are saying that they're on an old system that isn't working, like just think that through a little bit and think about what you're paying and what the change management and unintended consequences of that change might be, where you may just want to have somebody who's done this before take a look at it and help you think through what the options could look like.
I'm going to mention three things, really exciting things in the family office. We'll buzz through them a little quickly about how you're integrating more modern solutions, perhaps AI, and maybe give an example. I'm going to start with maybe the single most valuable automation you've built around one of the big three exciting ones here, Greg, an accounting platform. Maybe you could give us an example.
Yeah, there's a few things that come to mind. Obviously, when we talk about private investing, there's a huge challenge when it comes to making sure that data that people are recording is accurate for both accounting and reporting purposes, and sometimes those two goals don't mesh. So I guess one of the things I helped the client do was, after we spent a good amount of time in a project to kind of clean up their data and make sure we had a structured way to record transactions. We were able to create dashboards really quickly with my knowledge of their application and AI assistance to create them a library of reports and visibility that was never possible. And I think that's just a derivative of a lot of what I do today. It's just helping educate clients as I'm savvy enough with these tools now, can show them how impressive they could be with real data behind them. So, pick your favorite family office topic, whether it's investment research, tax cost basis, recording journal entries from investment activity, enhancing, legacy investment reporting, even having structured decisions on types of workflows. Like imagine having AI placed in between certain workflows for a decision point. Those are all real examples of things that we built around first getting the data in order, and then kind of understanding what is this right prototype and what are we looking to build, and keeping that in scope. And we've had success. But I think when you say what's the one thing, I think the thing that I think jumps out at me is the way we could give impressive visuals on, let's call it a legacy system, to someone who was really eyeballing 3 or 4 other systems that would have been hundreds of thousands of dollars, and we're able to produce that from the existing system with just some, tidying up of data and structuring of transactions, right? So, a lot of this is just doing the work, and it's like then AI could take you to, that promised land, which is what everybody's looking for: unified reporting, something they could trust, something they can make decisions around, something that looks good, they could pull up on their phone, they could pull up on their computer. That's ultimately what we're trying to build: solutions that are practical for people, that leverage existing tools. Like this idea of we have to go buy a tool to do something. I don't know that that's really the right mindset in 2026 versus, is our data in order? Are we being the right stewards of, financial data, investment data, all those sort of things. So, I look at it as just an evolution of the times we're in, and just having to catch up. Again, you asked for a one sentence answer, and I went for probably a few paragraphs there, at least.
We'll get to the other two, reconciliation and document intake, in a second. But because I like to mix things up a little bit, and a little feedback did come in, and they're correct. Their perception is I made a little bit of frontier versus open white, a little black and white. Like many things, it's gray. And I understand at the highest levels, like a Fable 5, the deep reasoning is going to be the best on the frontier models. There are some that may debate that a little bit with Kimi 3, but I don't want you APIing to a Chinese model. Not a good idea. And practically none of you have the hardware to run a full, a Kimi 3 at the moment. It's probably like $500,000. That's going to change. That's going to adapt, and open weight models on deep reasoning are catching up. I could debate, do we always need that deep reasoning? For execution and other services, open weight's going to be fine. And we didn't even bring up, if you're using Frontier and you're using agents and 24/7 autonomous, and you're using Fable 5, you are going to have a huge bill. Your tokens are going to explode. In open weight, guess how much your cost is? I'm assuming no APIing. It's zero. I mean, I guess it's your electricity. So yeah, you got the upfront of the hardware, but the more specific thing that they're bringing up, and they're correct, and my books do talk about it, there is a way to use frontier models through a service like AWS, Bedrock, where you could have it sandboxed, sanitized. They're not training on your data. That doesn't get rid of the token cost and some of the other prospective challenges. But for many families, it's not black and white. It's a combination of the black, the white, and the gray. How do you work with them in understanding and helping them understand, listen, if you're going to be running this 24/7, you may be $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 a month if you're using the highest level Fable 5 or even 5.6 and chat GPT for everything, how do you get them to understand the nuances, and maybe a hybrid is the best approach?
Yeah, look, it's a good question, Angelo. I'll be honest, and not a lot, that question doesn't come up a lot because I think people are still, like I said, the majority of people are using it like a search engine or an inbox assistant, and they don't really ask the questions and I, the reason why, again, I'm on this podcast and why we're talking is because I think there's, an alarm that we have to sound so people start thinking about these things and start thinking about AI in that way. So yes, Amazon Bedrock. You could run a frontier model on hardware that no one sees but Amazon, basically, right? So the tokens remain inside that infrastructure, and you pay Amazon for the token costs. And that's a really attractive infrastructure for a lot of people. Could be considered best of breed. Token costs could be high, absolutely. But I think, I try to go back to what is it? Is it a free for all? Everybody's just spinning up Claude chats and anybody could use the agent for whatever they want, or is there actually a business purpose behind it? And like, are we using it for investing? Are we using it for accounting? Whatever it is. And that's where I think, just have a frank conversation, because some of the local models, and we can get into naming what they are, like something like the latest Quen model that could fit on a normal NVIDIA video card or a MacBook, right? That's a very powerful model, right? So you ask about, well, how should they think about this? Fable 5, amazing model. GPT 5.6, another amazing model. These are incredible tools. They could do so much for you. They could work for hours on something if you give it to them. But what's more impressive about them is if you really tighten up your prompt and you make it very specific around something in terms of architecture that you want to build, or something around a problem that you're trying to solve, and you have it develop a plan or a strategy, or you have Fable 5 skills that you inside your harness, now getting a little technical here, but the same idea. You use that super intelligence for really specific information, and you have it spit back to you really short token lengths. Control your costs, right? But use that frontier model for its purpose, for that ultimate intelligence where you need that highest end decision, where you need that real supreme intelligence. But use it and use it when you don't share your data, right? So there are these strategies that you have to have. You have to be creative around it. There's no right answer, but I've been finding success when I'm doing some more technical building and coding around using those frontier models for that planning, for that actual, how should I code this? What is my infrastructure inside my application? And maybe what should the design features look like, and debate that. But when I get to the actual coding, that all goes offline. That goes offline into a repository that I control, that's not in the cloud, unless I decide I want to back it up and encrypt it to the cloud. But that's ultimately what we're talking about with like data ownership and your trust boundary. What ultimately must live inside your trust boundary, and understand like what is good enough. And honestly, the local models today are good enough, and they're only going to get much better. So this idea of, Greg, like, you talk about local AI, I don't really think they're like, look what Fable can do, look what GPT can do. And I would just say, yeah, I mean, look what these tools can do next week or in a couple of months, because they're going to be extremely powerful. So anyway, Angela, that's the way I would think about a lot of
I
those.
mean, it's gotten so competitive, Greg, which is great for the consumer, because you and I, for the last couple of months, were on the frontier models, really only talking about what Anthropic's doing and what OpenAI's doing. Earlier in the year, it almost felt like it was only Anthropic, and they have an incredibly powerful suite: managed agents, dynamic workflows. OpenAI back in the race about 2 months ago, and finally it got more competitive in the last 2 or 3 weeks. Grok 4.5 is legit, and Meta is back in the race with their frontier model, which actually slightly impressed me more than I thought. And if you were to go to Hugging Face and try to look at options and open weight models, I'm not kidding, there are like millions, but there's like 5 or 10 that are among the more prominent. We could go really deep down this rabbit hole. We have a fair amount more subjects to cover. I did leave off a little bit before I got on a tangent on the accounting platform. Let's switch now to reconciliation, the task every family office hates, but every family office has to do, and often something that a principal never really sees how the sausage is made. What does AI assisted reconciliation actually look like if done right?
I would think about it as like a reconciliation basically means, does one record from, let's call it, a third party match my own records, right? I'm reconciling one set of records to another, right? And matching that up. And I think when we think about that, there's a certain set of rules that people have to follow to do a quote unquote reconciliation. So a lot of what we've been doing, and this is not new work, but as a consultant, right, is helping people establish what are the steps, what are the rules we need to do reconciliation. So, in the, let's say the last few years, there's been some rule-based applications out there for things like accounting or translation of investment information to journal entries, right? There are tools that do that, but there are also tools that help with, and this is nothing new, that have rules to help you with reconciling. So what does AI assisted reconciliation look like? You guys might see a theme here, but again, we're talking about data, we're talking about rules. So AI would sit on top of very structured, well-defined rules for reconciliation. And then when you have that, you basically have, that maybe that person that all they did was reconciliation. Well, now that person can do something else in the office. That person could go on vacation. That person doesn't have to worry about the close on the first if she's reconciling bank accounts. These are the types of workflows where it's very deterministic. Like, we have these rules, you must follow these rules and do this, that AI is extremely good at. But you have to be able to provide it that context, that definition to get the results that you want. But yeah, essentially AI assisted reconciliation means I have a set of rules that my AI can follow to get me to the finish line.
And maybe one other subject. I promised there would be a big three that is just so exciting. Here's the third: document intake, capital call notices, K1s, insurance renewals, property tax bills, paper that runs kind of the family office. How far can intelligent extraction actually go today?
Great question. Now, if you were to upload, let's say, all your investment statements to Claude and say, hey, Claude, can you extract all the data out of these statements and give me some, cap tables, and give me some, exposure reporting to see where I own SpaceX across all these investments or whatever. Claude could do something completely amazing, and you'd be like, why am I paying X vendor to do this? I could hand this to Claude every quarter. However, you are also handing Claude your asset allocation, your GP, LP relationships, all those things, which, quite frankly, in the family office world, if you're moving the capital like that, that's not something that should be in the public domain, right? Which I'm not saying that Anthropic or Claude or ChatGPT will put that in the public domain, but again, there are retention policies, there are things. We talk about establishing your trust. I'm not saying who you should trust or not, but those are the things you have to think about. Again, document management. There are so many open source tools today that, SaaS providers basically use and rely on or model on, that have become like industry standards. So, PDFs have become used to be a huge pain point in the industry. There are so many tools out there that could handle PDF extraction today, which is a great thing. Mm-hmm. However, like, to really make use of that, having an AI layer on top of that extraction, and then having let's call it a memory loop, so that the AI agent, whatever that might be, a Frontier agent or something local that you're running on a Hermes or such, learns from that type of document and knows what to do the next time. That's all possible today. It's a little bit of there's not just like a plug and play for that unless you want to go to the cloud. There's so much of that. So, there's obviously in the family office world, for what you gave the example, we're talking about vendors. There's Arch, there's Canoe, there's a lot of others as well that do this. But I think, even those companies are opening up what else they could do because of all the democracy of the technology available, I guess what I'm saying, if you have the data and you have the documents, you could take part of that democratization of tech that we're going through right now, right? And use these tools as well. And I'm not saying to become your own vendor, but why do you have to share the? And I guess I would say like pre 2026, even with AI tools we had last year, this was possible, but it was a big project. This is a few months build to have something permanent, right? And I'm saying enterprise grade permanence. I'm not talking about vibe coding something in a couple of weeks. I'm talking about enterprise level that could pass like a family office board, and say, hey, we're actually doing this. We're implementing this document tool inside our family office for whatever reason, like they would make any other technology decision, like building something. That's possible. That's possible to do today without going to market. It's not for everyone. And I guess what I'm saying here is know that option exists. It's not a false promise anymore. It's not, oh, that's going to be possible one day. People are doing that right now. We're doing that right now for certain.
Exactly. Well, you went there, Greg. We got about 10 minutes left. Let's go hard and fast, I guess you could say. And yes, someone commented, Angelo, you didn't mention Gemini. Supposedly, Gemini shortly is coming out with a more competitive product. They're actually decent on their open weight product and an American brand that some of you may feel more comfortable with. And Notebook LM has now been rebranded as Gemini LM, and it is good. Because they own YouTube, it's incredible at running YouTube videos into it. And there's other extractions that I do with PDFs and decks that I get where you could get what's called with less hallucination. But again, we could do a hyper deep dive into the nuances of frontier and open weights and little nuances they're best at. Maybe the thing to understand is it changes frequently. There's lots of competition where it didn't feel as much that way 6 months ago. And that's good for you all, the consumer. So on what you said, maybe one more thing. We spoke a lot, and you were there as a co-lead instructor in the last masterclass in June, that even if you're prompting, it's changed so much and gotten so much more powerful. And by the way, if you're typing, it's not as natural as you talking. Talk about with OpenAI and outside programs like Whisper and others, you could have such natural conversations with the AI now. I'm almost going to say it's a little eerie. And with certain OpenAI products remotely, you could whip up a swarm of agents, give it instructions, adapt your markdowns. I know I'm getting a little deep into the weeds, but talk about the power of voice and how much more powerful and natural that's gotten in the last couple of months.
It's amazing. I think that's it was a bit of an adjustment, but I found myself wanting to do more, talking to typing to agents. So I'm a cursor user. It's one of the platforms I really find to be useful in my day-to-day. I'm in it every day, running lots of different agents, but part of that is like you have to switch between things, and there's a lot of typing, at least prior to a couple of months ago. But yeah, I'm using Typeless. That's a tool like WhisperFlow, uses the same AI model to dictate my prompting and natural language, right? Clean this up, go in there, do this, do that. And it's funny, you would definitely speak differently than the way you would type. And it's immensely more productive. I'm immensely more productive doing it that way. Again, not so natural. You get used to it. Some people might be easier for some than others, but in terms of I think for ideas that you're just maybe flowing, like this idea of truly just vibing with your AI. If you're talking to the AI with your voice, things will come out that probably wouldn't come out through the keyboard. So I do find it to be very useful. It is definitely eerie, to quote your word, to be talking to your computer. But welcome to 2026. Yeah.
Indeed. And we've been both hinting at it. Let's do a little bit of an intense, deeper dive. And again, it may be uncomfortable for some people with services and SaaS companies in the industry. I'll put on a little bit more of the Darth Vader hat and you can maybe bring me back into a little bit of an equilibrium. Maybe that's the right word. Inevitably, you have to go from chat to actually doing things and building with an AI, both in frontier and open weight. I promise you, it's not that hard. But like they say, eating an elephant, you got to take one bite at a time. Although I think that could be greatly accelerated, like I said, my 30 days. I'm at the point now, and you may be too, where I'm working with principals older than me in their 70s that are not tech savvy. We're going into Bolt.new, we're going into Cursor, and then inevitably maybe we bump up to more complexity in Claude Code, or we didn't have time to really get into, if I go hardcore open weight, maybe I pick a harness like Hermes, and I know how to structure that. And effectively, I'm talking, as we just described, I'm talking into at least prototype existence platforms that I could actually use, whether it's CRM, whether it's some level of reconciliation, whether it's a deal diligence platform that I create from a markdown file. I'm getting a little deep, I'm sorry. And then we create effectively an application. Now, you mentioned, correct, a year ago, that was a little complex. In the last 3 to 4 months, it's gotten, I mean, probably actually 9 months, it's 4.5 Opus and Claude Code, but it's getting so good. There is no question. A lot of the SaaS companies you're losing, let a play on words, you're using now. You're going to be able to recreate more private and targeted, specific for you. If we're not quite there yet on some more advanced uses, we may be weeks or months away. Like you said, the SaaS companies, some of them will evolve. Some of them will have other services and advantages. And I know there are times you do want to rent and not own. I agree. But if you're believing in sovereign, want to have control and privacy, this is not a year ago. This is now. You can build. And I'm going to be the one who's going to go out there. You could pull me back a little bit, Greg. It's actually not that hard anymore.
Look, there's a lot there. Number one, what I would say is this is not naturally everybody's day job. I'm unique in the fact that I had a technology role inside a family office that straddled the business. I wasn't an IT guy, right? I actually worked with the business people. I worked in investment reporting across the accounting staff, the operations, right? But focused on tech. And I don't think there's a lot of us out there. I'm not trying to pat myself on the back or raise my hand. I'm just saying that role doesn't exist. So people to have that natural technical inclination is what you need. However, can you find that? Can you develop that? Sure. And actually, to your point, it's never been easier to get up to speed. You have AI to teach you. You have AI to teach you all these things. You have a tutor next to you to guide you through the whole process. How did I learn all these things? Exactly that way. ChatGPT, how do I do this? Gemini, how do I do that? How do I set up Hermes? How do I do this with Olama? How do I do that? How do I tune this model that way? It's a great time to be alive if you're curious and you're technically inclined. And it is not that hard if you have a knack for this and you want to learn. There's a lot to learn. I don't want to sugarcoat it. There's a lot to learn. This is new. This didn't exist last year. Agentic AI in the present form of today did not exist last year, right? There was talk about it. People knew it was coming. We saw the signs. Here we are. And now we're also in a world where open models are becoming just as powerful as the closed models. So, things are really catching up quick. And I think that's where, to your point, it's never been easier to spin up an app. It becomes even more important to make sure you're doing that on structured data, because it's going to be hard to tell slop from real trusted intelligence when people are all using those models. But I would agree, like the idea of putting something in a prompt and spinning up a useful application, like that is the world we live in right now. And especially if you have the context and have worked inside family offices for a long time and you know these systems, wow, can you do amazing things? And like, that's what I work on every day. I'm amazed at the stuff that used to take me and a team of consultants weeks to do, and we do it in an hour, 15 minutes. Like, it's just, that's the type of work where I think when you're technical and you know to use these tools and you see where the capital is flowing, the capital in these AI tools is all flowing towards coding, code generation, software. And that does not mean family offices have to be left out, right? That does not mean family offices have to be left out of that conversation. You don't need to, you could learn on your own. You could hire experienced vendors that do this, myself, other trusted people in the network that understand what it takes to really build this, not just hearsay, understand what that investment looks like, what the timeline actually looks like. And again, Angela, I'm going to push back on the fact that, you could push up something in front of a principal in Bolt that looks great, but I probably would poke a million holes in it, to be honest with you, if it actually, because you can't, it's just not possible. Like, one prompt, a few prompts to create an app that's actually useful and, can solve all the problems in an office. Maybe it is, but I likely find holes in it and find ways to improve it. And again, when I say that, it's more around, is this really practically useful and structured around data the family office needs and wants every day? So, like I said, practicality, usefulness, not theater, not just, wow, look what I could do, but wow, look at the work and the productivity that's happening, right? And that's where I focus. Like, just being honest, right? I am not here to say wave a flag and say everybody must be on local AI or everybody must get off of SaaS. Quite the opposite. Everybody must be more technical, understand the marketplace more, understand their data more, and embrace AI and understand where it's going, right? So, it's probably a good way to end that question.
A very reasonable approach. And sure, on prototype, one-shot prompt, you'll be impressed what you could do, but it's going to need tweaking. And if you're a larger scale family office that really wants to get hardcore, maybe you hire a forward deployment engineer. And now, again, maybe not all the keys in the kingdom to one person, but wow, you're going to see that explode, I think, in the next year. It's such an interesting time. There are things we had to leave somewhat on the cutting room floor, a deeper dive into markdown files, second brain. If we're going hardcore sovereign and want the right harness for agentic systems, OpenClaw versus Hermes. But the good news, Greg, we'll have an opportunity in a couple of months to do a part two. And who knows what is going to evolve, even what we discuss now, but in those opportunities upcoming, because it's changing, not like a year ago where it felt like it took 2 or 3 months. Things are adapting effectively every day. And this is still under 4 years old, everyone. I'd like to wrap up. And by the way, as I get into my AI Family Office Masterclass, a couple of words about Greg. He both spoke and attended my first one early summer of 2025. He did a great job. And like I said, his humbleness and hearing some incredible instructors, Bennett Borden, who may be the #1 attorney on family office governance and is a technologist, and people like Michael Sikorsky, kudos to you for opening your eyes, adapting some of your thinking, and then like me, I got to put in hundreds of hours here. I got a lot of work to do. And you came out of this, you're tremendously talented and gifted at what you do. So kudos to you. And having you back at the Masterclass June 23rd and 24th a couple of weeks ago and taking more of a significant role and showcasing and being an advocate of sovereign and a lot of the things we're talking about now, you did a fantastic job. I would recommend to any family that would think this is going to be a little bit of a heavy lift to do it from ground zero, you're right. Someone like Greg is going to be someone that can work with your family office and help to understand the nuances and streamline it. All that being said, I have another masterclass, August 12th and 13th. You'll again, and I'm fortunate to have you as an instructor, and perhaps even in November when I do my early fall one. If you could talk a little bit about, we had one of the attendees state that wow, Angelo, I'm pretty fluid on tech. This took it 3 levels up. I learned so much. And I don't know if he wants me to mention his last name, but Sam, who's one of our lead instructors, developed a markdown file on kind of a deal scorecard investment thesis that this member put to work and said, wow, this is so good. It may literally save me and the team hundreds of hours. And my attendees, who would need to be a member, got that. And now we know that hands-on building and sharing among faculty and members, real family offices sharing together and maybe building together and sharing what they built, like it's really ready to take off now. So if you don't mind, from your perspective, a little bit of your experience and some of the things that you'll be talking about and why as a family office, and yes, they would have to join my private community, SFO Continuity. The value that they get from, I don't know if I ever shared my books with you, but a collective of my books, me, people like you as faculty, multiple masterclasses a year, and the community that gets built from that, the value that a family office may see in something like that.
Yeah. Angelo, first of all, thank you for including me both last year and allowing me to be a co-lead this year. Really, my thoughts were, and you remember when I reached out to you over a couple of years ago at this point, you were a thought leader on this idea of AI, and naturally we had conversations. And look, again, keeping it grounded, I thought it was a great masterclass last year. I would like to participate. The key, my key thing was just the ability to learn from everyone and network. And I just felt like that was so valuable around a topic that everyone was so interested in and engaged. And what was also really interesting to me was coming back again this year and reacquainting with several people, several principals who I met last year, whose AI skills and knowledge has also just kind of, like we're talking about, like you and I have both put in the time and effort, but we've seen your members, Angelo, do the same. And just people are just really engaged. And I think the format is something worth mentioning. I mentioned this to you before, Angelo, like I always find conferences and get-togethers, that have a lot of vendors or showcases and things, and maybe light on actual relevant content. We're in a boardroom 8-9 hours going through deeply technical stuff, and we're sitting next to each other, shoulder to shoulder, and yeah, we're taking bio breaks and stuff. But look, we're in there and we're working together, and it's a workshop, and we learn from each other. We get to learn, meet, work intimately. So kind of like a boot camp, right? And I think those type of conferences, those type of get-togethers are so valuable when you get people in the room that do the same types of things, that are interested in the same thing and want to solve a problem and want to learn. And I learn from Sam. Sam learns from me. The instructors learn from each other. The attendees learn from each other. So look, if that sounds like your idea of a good networking event and a good educational event, I think that alone would make sense to join Angelo's organization. I'm very careful to say that. My reputation, I don't partner with any entities, right? I'm kind of neutral in that sense. Hence, I don't really go after, some of the leading, let's call it family office communities and sponsor. That's just not what I do. However, I recognize that sponsorship model is also not what Angelo does, right? And this is something I just find really valuable. It's a focused event on networking with like-minded people that want to learn about AI. And I can't wait to go back, because we're gonna learn new stuff, and we're gonna spend some time. And yes, we'll get technical, but also I think we'll be better prepared this time, Angelo, based on some feedback we got. So that'll be good as well.
Well, thank you, Greg. I do appreciate you. And I don't want to exaggerate, but yes, most of my revenue, like 90% plus, does come from families who are committed as members and get real value. We'll occasionally have an underwriter of a program like a masterclass, 1 or 2 sponsors at a larger event, and they bring value from their intellect or resources to the community. So I'm not trying to distance myself from them. Selectively, carefully, under my protocol, they may be a good fit. I just feel the industry has become a glorified event for many people, where you may bump into some good people, but the value of the intellectual rigor and content is very, very light. I could afford to do what I do, to have it be more intimate, more high touch. It's a more limiting model, not quite as high flying as what I used to do back in when I was founder and running Family Office Association for a number of years. It's different. I do enjoy it. And the master classes, and I'll take credit for quarterbacking and orchestrating, but they work because of people like you, Greg, people like Sam, MJ, Bennett, and others that are valuable, giving back to the community as real people. In Sam's case, a real principal of wealth and technologist. In your case, a technologist who worked in a single family office. People like Matt, who's a real single family office executive to this day, who came in and shared his experience, how he came in as a member attendee and then kind of became an instructor because he's so good. You're not only good people, all of you, you're incredibly talented in providing value to the community. I could not do it myself. And it would be one voice. It would get, especially with me being overbearing, it would be too much after probably 1 hour, let alone 9 hours. So you and Sam at the last one, and Matt, and likely you three again, I'm honored to have you. You're incredible. Sam, if you're listening, that markdown file is like legendary. It's iconic. You did an incredible job and you're giving back to the community, and kudos to you. We hope to give back to you as well. So Greg, I really appreciate you. For those that would like to learn more, either to follow you on LinkedIn or social, your website, and maybe engage with you about kind of in tech and AI consultation, how could they learn more?
Yeah, thanks, Angelo. Great to be here today. Greg Silverman, ClarityEdge. You could find my website, clarityedge.ai or clarityedgellc.com. Either website, you could find a place to book a meeting with me if you'd like to talk about that. And you could also find me on LinkedIn.
Well, thank you. And again, I just like to point out that Greg is very, very talented at what he does. He's completely dedicated. His knowledge and his hands-on use, especially around the sovereign aspects, it is exceptional and very, very good. And I think for any of you as single or multifamily offices to go completely down this road alone without the help, perhaps an organization like mine, my books and masterclasses, but people like a Greg and selectively others, you're making it harder than you need to. You don't necessarily need to put in the 300 to 500 hours. You can learn from some of the mistakes and challenges that we had and we made. And I'm not kidding when I say in 30 days, maybe because the benchmark is so low, by family office standards, if you really put yourself into it, you could be a top 1 or 2% user. What I'm really trying to say, while others may be resting this summer, if you take everything into account that I'm talking about, including the masterclass, you could come out of this summer. We're halfway through it now, or a little more than half, well, unofficially, if I factor in Labor Day, not September 21st. You could do it this summer. And if you're a principal, if you're a rising gen, and actually, especially if you're an executive, because I do think there are some concerns that you should have here around this as the years play out. I want you to be the best within your capabilities, and you could do it. I promise you. You probably need some hand-holding. We'll make it happen. Greg, I greatly appreciate you. Thanks for being on. And I look forward to seeing you August 12th and 13th at the AI Family Office Masterclass. It'll be a pleasure. Thank you.
Look forward to it, Angelo. Thanks.
Thank you.